Thanks for coming back. Happy to have you again.
We are happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you again, Zach, for asking us to come back and share some of our new music with you and listen to some music that we enjoy and are influenced by ourselves.
Yeah, of course. Happy to have you back. I myself have listened to the album. Came out on October 27th. Before we get right into the music, is there anything you want to preface with? The album, of course, is called Two-Sided Truth.
Yeah, this album is celebrating 7 years that the trio's been playing together.
Wow.
The first time we played together was back in 2010, and since then we've been, growing and exploring different things. And this album takes on some new stuff for us because we are using the Rhodes, not just the traditional piano trio format, which allowed us to kind of, play a little differently and explore some new things. So for those of you listening, I hope you enjoy both of the piano trio, but also some of that newer Rhodes music as well.
So John, could you talk a little bit about Two-Sided Truth and what that sort of means to you? To me, it sounds like sort of a statement on subjectivity, that maybe there's no one unilateral truth, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the title Two-Sided Truth comes from a quote by one of my favorite writers, Hermann Hesse, from his great book Siddhartha. And the quote is, "In every truth, the opposite is equally true." And in the storyline, I'm not going to go into detail. It portrays a certain, to me at least, portrays a certain idea that, a lot of circumstances have to happen for one action to take place, and that if you look at things from multiple perspectives, it'll really help you understand wholly what it is that you're trying to understand. So the idea of there being this two-sided truth, I just liked that, and so I kind of ran with that. Also, in that first composition, I tried to write the piece so that it was in two contrasting sections to kind of draw in that idea of there being two sides to how this piece of music worked. So the first section was rhythmically complicated but harmonically simple, and then the second section of it is a little bit more harmonically complex but rhythmically and melodically simple. So trying to play with that idea.
Yeah, definitely. And as much as those words kind of like ring true as like a guide to life, perhaps it also, I think, as you point out, is equally true in the music itself, maybe particularly of jazz music, that kind of there's one person's truth and then the opposite is equally true, in that like the playing on that is complementary, not always together, but sometimes in like a contrasting complementary way. So yeah, I guess it does speak also to how you play together as a group and also drift apart and find each other again, the natural course of an improvised tune. That's definitely really cool.
Part of this whole idea of the two-sided truth theme is having the piano trio and the Rhodes trio, is that you'll notice that the tunes that are written for the Rhodes are a lot more open and explore more. I wrote them so that the solo sections were sometimes just over these long one-chord vamps, or have sections in them that allow us to kind of veer off from some kind of cyclical. I can't even say that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Cyclical.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Chord progression. So
Yeah.
here's an example of one of those.
So here now is Life and Rewind, third track from the album Two-Sided Truth, out now by the Jon Di Fiore Trio here on the WKCR Musicians Show. Enjoy. Third album, Three People. How has that experience been, and how has it kind of changed your approach to each album? We're now three deep. We've had Patience, which had a few other musicians on it, and then Yellow Petals with you three.
Yeah, well, we all play together in different contexts, so we're all very used to playing with each other in a, just a regular jazz setting and with various other musicians and other leaders and stuff. But really, I'd say the creative force behind this trio is Jon, because Jon writes all the music and comes to us with a finished package for every recording we've done. He has, everything is already completed and in the computer, and he knows what he wants he has an idea of what he wants for the sound of the record, and it's very easy actually. We just come in and read the stuff down and try to develop it a little bit, but it's all pretty much there once we start.
How detailed is that with the kind of music that you give them, the compositions? How specific is your direction?
I would say that I think it's about half and half. I mean, all of the melodies and chord changes and things are pre-written out, and sometimes I'll go as far as writing out specific bass lines and stuff for Billy to play. But I guess besides that, though, I try and give these guys as much freedom to interpret it as they want. Like Adrian was saying, we take some time to develop it a little bit. I mean, you can go back and listen to the rehearsal recordings we did, when we first played this stuff compared to what actually came out on the album, and it definitely changes over time. And sometimes these guys will suggest, well, what if we played it this way, or what he did this 2 times instead of just 1 time through, and I think over time, eventually, what comes out at the end is although I do write the music, it is a collective effort, because it wouldn't move in certain directions that it does if it weren't for the what these guys put into the music.
Yeah.
And with this particular album, for the first time I wrote music that I kind of thought, if I write this, I know that these guys will be able to do this in this section of the music.
Yeah.
Yellow Petals was our first trio album without any other instrumentalists on it, just 3 of us. And that, for me, was more of, I just wanted to try and write music that would fit in a trio context, and at the time I was studying composition in college, and so there was a lot of really compositional things in mind, techniques and ideas and stuff that I was learning at the time I was throwing into the music. But this time around, I really sat down and said, this is the trio. I know what we're capable of, and I'm going to try and write music that allows us to go into places that I think will work.
Right. So less about the instrumentation and maybe the history behind like a trio format, and more about the people at those instruments and writing for them this time around.
Sure.
Cool. And did you err on the side of more rehearsal or less rehearsal leading up to this album?
It was a good mix, I'd say. It was.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like whatever, but I don't want it to be over-rehearsed either. I think there's a certain magic in exploring things in the moment and not just playing something so many times that when you get to this section, you're going to play it the same way. I really want the music to go places in the moment. So, I mean, we had some performances we did before we went into the studio, and we definitely rehearsed for each one of those, so that helped. And then leading up to the studio date, we definitely spent some time where it was more focused. Okay, when we get here, let's really work on this, because I want it to sound, this way when we get there. But for the most part, I try and keep it fresh, so that it doesn't sound too monotonous when we get to the studio.
Yeah. And what were some of the inspirations for writing this album and making the choice to include Rhodes and some of those choices?
Well, I bought a Rhodes, I don't know, maybe a year and
That's how it
half
starts.
ago now.
A lot of my friends, as soon as they buy a Rhodes, they're all about the Rhodes.
Exactly. And
once you have one, you'll know.
Yeah. I play piano. I don't take gigs on piano or anything. I'm not that kind of
Do you
pianist.
compose on the piano?
Yes, that's exactly. I call myself like a composer's pianist,
Yeah.
And so I had a keyboard, and that's what I had written a lot of music on. And then I got this Rhodes, and I started writing music on the Rhodes. And like Billy was talking about before, I noticed there are different things that you can do on the Rhodes. There's different things sound different. Chord voicing sound different, or certain note choices on chords sound different on the Rhodes. And so I said, this is like another avenue. I can write some stuff that I can't achieve on the piano with this. And then, I brought some of that stuff to Billy and said, can you play this on the Rhodes for me? How would this sound? And we kind of worked some stuff out. And so that was really the motivation behind the Rhodes. I got one and started to realize I had this new avenue.
Yeah. And we spoke a little bit about how maybe, Billy, that changed your approach or how you felt playing that instrument. But then reciprocally, how did that kind of affect your playing, Adrian or Jon? Like, I hear a lot of cymbal work from you that I think is really nice and kind of hugs the track. And, the bass.
Sure.
How is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the Rhodes, there is a certain timbre, especially in the lowest part of the Rhodes, that would potentially clash with any sort of bass line.
Yeah.
There are some great bands like Chris Potter's Underground and stuff like that actually the Rhodes player Craig Taborn plays left-hand bass lines. And so I mean it can be used, but I think the way Billy played it completely stayed out of my way the whole time. I wouldn't say my playing was too affected by it. Maybe Jon, your drumming was affected in some sort of way, but you know, it does have a more a warm type of sound to it. You know, it is. I don't want to say it's an acoustic instrument, but it's like a real acoustic
Right.
electronic instrument. You know, it
Yeah.
can go out of tune.
Yep.
And it actually, you know, has acoustic parts to it.
Yeah,
So
the tines can break.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
It's
So
surprising when you did that happen.
I've never had that happen. I hope
No.
it never happens.
Yeah.
cross your fingers.
Good.
Right,
Knock
knock
on
on
wood.
wood. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the sound is very warm. Just you know, it's an old instrument. You know, it's been around since the 70s or something like that. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
You know, like the piano, the Rhodes also has a percussive thing to
True.
it. You know, there's a
Yeah.
crunchy kind of percussive sound that comes out of certain areas of the Rhodes, and
Yeah.
and that will affect how I choose to play certain ideas on the drums, because I may want to mimic that short sound, opposed to
Mhm.
maybe Billy might play something on the piano that's got a little bit more sustain to it. Or
Yeah.
even on the shorter sounds on the piano, there's always that residual ring that comes off of the attack of the string.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily get that off the Rhodes, so it changes, you know, that after sound, which I can also replicate that on the drums.
Yeah.
So, you know, muting the sounds after I hit the drum.
Yeah,
Right.
I think it gave us a really different avenue for interaction. A lot of time, like listening back to it just now, there were moments where I'm like, oh, I don't remember us doing those things when we, you know, when it was a piano thing,
Right.
especially because of that percussive element.
Right.
And one of the beauties of playing with each other for as long as we have is we know each other's playing pretty well, but when
Yeah.
there's something that gets introduced that sort of opens up a different door, the kind of team spirit to like, oh, let's just see where this takes us.
Yeah.
It just kind of like fills it up to a whole different capacity.
Yeah, this kind of made it fresh again, enlivened the trio.
There's a scenario that happens a lot when we're approaching new music, where Adrian will come up with a bass line over a certain section, and I think the three of us will just look at each other and go, "Oh yeah, do that again. You know, don't stop doing that. We
If I
want
can
that
remember
to."
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, right.
Did you record that one, man?
Yeah,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, so like Billy's saying, definitely.
Yeah, so pretty collaborative, and also I'd say confident. I think it does show how long you've been playing on this album and how well you're able to respond to each other and anticipate what you're going to do next. Yeah, really nice. And it goes back to William Patterson for you all in some way.
Basically, I
Yep.
think oddly enough, we met outside of the walls of William Patterson, and then
Yeah.
very
Well.
quickly we found ourselves inside those walls.
Jon used to play at a place on 9th Avenue and 44th Street
Something like that. It's
called
43rd or 44th.
Rachel's. It's a little restaurant, and Jon used to play Friday and Saturday. And through mutual connections, basically, Jon's teacher from his undergrad in NJCU
Yeah.
is Tim Horner. He's a great family friend of my family's.
Okay.
And so we got introduced that way, and Jon started calling me to sub on the gig. And then Jon was also playing late nights at Smoke Jazz Club sometimes. So Jon got me on that, and a few weeks later, the piano player couldn't make it, and I said, call Billy, you know. So
And that was the first time
That's
we
how it
were
happened,
there?
yeah.
That was the first
Yeah, it was
time.
at Smoke, actually,
At Smoke.
strangely enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just down the street
Yeah,
from
and then
here. Yeah.
Billy started subbing at Rachel's every now and then. We played trio and realized, oh man, this is really good. You know.
So you decided after that, some live performances, that you should do more with this trio, with
Yeah.
this setup,
Yeah.
write some music.
And I think that was right around the same time that I was having my recital, one of my recitals for
Right.
my undergrad, and so I
Yeah.
asked these guys to play on it, and I think that was what really solidified it, because we had played some of my original music for that event, and then it was kind of like, all right,
Nice.
I like the way these guys play. You
Yeah.
know, they have a like-minded approach to what I'm trying to do. And then William Patterson we were all kind of came through that program as well, so there's a lot of connections there, and
Right.
you know,
right.
more growth happened.
Right. So even if you didn't quite meet there, I guess given that exposure to people and music there, you share some sensibilities. We're going to play some Mulgrew Miller next.
Oh yeah, I think
Obviously a big.
We
big
all studied
figure.
with him, you know.
Yeah, Mulgrew was
yeah.
a big
Yeah.
impact on all three of us. You know,
Yeah.
we were asked to come back and play a concert at William Patterson just a few weeks ago, and we played some
Oh,
of
yeah.
Mulgrew's music there. And I remember saying to the students there, you know, unfortunately, a lot of those students we played for didn't get a chance to work with Mulgrew.
Yeah.
But we very fortunately did. And I remember saying to them, when I look back at my time there, when I met Mulgrew Miller, I just wanted to be like him. Not because of how good of a musician he was, but because of how beautiful a person he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that these guys will attest to that.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I took from Mulgrew Miller. Yes, he taught me great things about music. He, you know, told me stories that, you know, I'll never forget, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, helped me understand things differently. But really, just wanting to be as humble and in tune of a person as he was
Mm-hmm.
is
He
what.
was one of those human beings that it's a once in a blue moon type of thing. You really don't
Yeah.
meet someone like that for a long time, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
throughout your whole life, I probably won't meet another Mulgrew, you know, like just what a force he was on and off the piano, and how dedicated he was to music, and, you know, even at his age, or, you know, after he had his first stroke, and he was still teaching and still practicing all the time
Yeah.
and still playing, and it was just a really beautiful thing, an inspiring thing to be around. So
Yeah. Amazing. And
Yeah.
you, Billy, obviously.
Looking back, I think of Mulgrew in every facet, just sort of like a Midas. I mean, everything he touched was gold.
Mhm.
He was a wonderful educator.
You probably
He was
laugh
a
at that,
wonderful-
you know.
Probably. But I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a more. I mean, just everything piano wise is just gorgeous playing, really
Yeah.
wonderful playing. Always super swinging, beautiful sound, beautiful voice. I mean, everything that you'd want and more. And as a teacher, he was so supportive and so patient. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Incredibly patient, and just a really warm human being. And, you know, I don't think I ever heard him say anything bad,
Mhm.
even if it was about music that he
Yeah.
wasn't terribly into. I
Yeah,
remember
he's one of
asking him
those.
about one pianist, and him saying, "Oh, I'm not as," I think he said, "I'm not as passionate about that."
Yeah.
And I think it took me like a week before I realized that was his way of saying that it wasn't really his,
Yeah.
wasn't really his bag, and thought like that's how we should say everything.
Right.
Like, I'm just not as passionate about that.
Right. But he didn't knock it. It's
No, he
just,
didn't knock it. He, you know, he said,
Yeah.
"Oh, great, you know, that's great musicianship, just not what I'm passionate about."
Right.
And was just really blown away about how open-minded and warm and supportive he was, you know, and not just a wonderful educator, but just someone to look up to as just a model for being a functional adult
Yeah.
in society. You know, that really was Mulgrew was all about
Yeah.
to me, you know.
Definitely. And you all teach now,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Do you think that's kind of in part to your positive experience with
Oh, I'm sure.
Mulgrew?
Yeah, yeah. And definitely served as a model of like what a good educator could be and should be.
Yeah, he had a very organic approach to teaching.
Yeah. Oh,
He,
yeah.
he didn't tell you, oh, you need to get this book, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but, or, you know, he was like, you want to learn how to do this, you know, get this record and try and figure out why these guys are playing what they're
Right.
playing on, you know, and it was, you know, not the traditional approach.
And
Well,
that's
I shouldn't say not the
yeah.
institutional approach. It
Right.
kind of is the traditional approach, but in a school setting, it was really nice to have.